We're back. So, last bit we have to do is align the tube and solder it in. While the camera was stopped, I cut the leads down to about, I'd say about a ½ inch, maybe a little longer. That just makes it a little easier to get in there with the soldering iron and leaves enough to fix any mistakes that we've made. At this point it looks pretty safe. I've taken a look at all the wires. Everything looks good. My no connects are where they're supposed to be. I don't have any kinks. I don't have any crossed wires. I don't have any missing wires. So it looks pretty good. If you wanted to at this point, you could very carefully separate all the wires and then actually power the clock up and see that everything is working, but it's a little dangerous to do because these are all high voltage wires, and if one gets crossed you're probably likely to fry something. So only do it if you really doubt that you've got the tube in there right. So the next step is aligning the tube, and basically what we want to do is make sure that the tube is squared to the board. We don't want it to be tilted up or down at all, and we don't want it to be tilted front to back at all. When it goes in the clock, we want it to be nice and square and stick out perfectly straight. So the best way that I found to do this is by rubber banding a block of wood to it and using it kind of as a square. So here I've got a little hunk of 2x4 and some rubber bands, and all I'm going to do is at the top of the board here, where there's not really any components, I'm just going to put this 2x4 here, and I'm going to use the rubber bands to snap across the back of the board. I know I'm not getting much of this in the camera, but it's just not a very easy process. And there's kind of a line in the chips at the top where the rubber band sits pretty nicely. So get that on there. And then kind of got off center here a little bit, but center that up. And then the rubber bands on the board should be holding the wood and the board square, and then we can kind of use that against the tube itself to square the tube up and down. Up and down is the most important dimension for getting the tube square. Back to front, if there's a little bit of mistake there, it's not too big a deal, but up and down looks really obvious once everything's mounted up. So once you've got those set, approximately like that, take a couple more rubber bands and add them around the tube itself to hold it still. Alright, and you can kind of adjust the tension on the rubber bands to pull the tube to the front a little bit, since everything's offset just a little bit. So now, if you look close, see if we get this in the camera, I've got the tube pressed against the board, and I'm sorry, the block of wood. I've got the block of wood pressed against the circuit board, and then on top I've got everything straightened out. So everything looks pretty square. I'm going to take a second to look that over. One thing to keep in mind is it's easy while you're doing this to pull the tube away from the circuit board, so make sure your tube's still snug up against the circuit board. So everything looks pretty good at this point. So this is similar to soldering the rest of the components in that you want to get 1 or 2 pins down to kind of hold the thing physically and dimensionally, and then worry about the rest once you've got that taken care of. Once you've got 4 opposite corners soldered on the tube, you're not going to be able to move it very much anymore. So what I try to do is solder, for instance, the north, 1 pin at north and south. So maybe 1 at the top here and 1 at the bottom here. And then I can use my soldering iron to loosen that solder up and adjust if anything's off center. And then do 1 pin west and 1 pin east and adjust those. Once that's set, you're pretty much locked in, and at that point you can just go ahead and solder the rest of the pins. So I'm going to get this set up and solder the first couple pins and check my alignment.